I'm fortunate enough to be here with Becky Castro. Hi, Becky. How are you today?
I'm good, Glenn. How are you doing?
I'm just fine. And Becky is a business and personal coach. She's been doing it formally for the last 3.5 years, but in some ways she's been doing it her whole life, and I'll let her tell us about that in a moment. Becky has consented to talk with me for an hour or so to give you more of the real-life experience that life coaches go through, some of the trials and tribulations and what she might like to do over again if she had a chance. Becky, why don't you tell us how you found out about life coaching, and what do you mean by saying that in some ways you've been doing it for your whole life?
Okay. I found out about coaching. I saw a little ad in a magazine. I was like, life coaching? Like, what is this? I remember calling the person and talking with her, and I didn't really understand it, and at that point people weren't readily saying, I'll give you a sample session so you can decide if this is for you. So I didn't know what to do, and I put it aside.
Becky, was that an ad for a coach or to be a life coach?
It was to hire a coach.
I see, okay.
Yeah. And then what happened was I had been working part-time and taking care of my kids, and my daughter was going to hit kindergarten, and I decided to really look at my life and really decide what was the next direction for me in my life. And I thought about a couple different career choices. I thought about becoming a lawyer, because I've always been interested in social change. I thought about becoming a mediator, a therapist, or a coach. And I don't really know why coach, but somehow it just kind of kept popping up in my mind. And at that point, I investigated hiring a coach and really loved being coached. And my coach encouraged me to try a weekend coaching, it was like the beginning of a training program. And when I went to that program on the first day, I remember thinking, I can take care of my love of social change, the mediation skills that I have, the therapist that's in me, and I want to be a coach. I can do all of this through coaching.
Interesting.
That was it.
Which program was that? Do you remember?
It was through the Coaches Training Institute, and that's the program that I eventually decided to train with them. Yeah.
That's one of the 3 recommended programs by the Coaching Federation, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's quite a few right now. I think there's about 10 right now that are accredited, and I decided the government's going to get their hands in here at some point, and I do not want to go back and get trained at that point because I knew that this is what I wanted to do. A lot of the schools have an hour information call. You can go and listen and see if that's the kind of the style that you want to be trained in. It definitely has a particular flavor. Some of the schools have a program for you, and so if you become a coach through their program and a client comes to you and tells you what's going on, you would say, here's what you need to do. Here's the program for you. And as a coach, you would determine that for your client. The Coaches Training Institute has a really different model. We really partner with our clients and elicit from our clients what it is that they need to do. And contrary to public opinion, we all really know what we need to do next in our life. There's just something blocking us.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you facilitate your clients' creative brilliance in overcoming their obstacles and achieving their goals.
Exactly, and remind my clients of their brilliance. We forget. There's this thing that I call collecting evidence. We're always collecting evidence in our lives for whatever it is, whatever decision that we want to make. We're always collecting evidence, and that evidence is either saying, I can't do this, I don't know the right people, I don't have the right training, I don't feel like it, I can't for some reason, or we're collecting evidence that says, I know how to do this, or I need this missing piece, or need to speak with this person and they'll know so-and-so, something that's inspirational. That's why you can see there's a lot of possibility there in inspiration, and that's what I remind people of.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you really help them to accumulate evidence for their success personality.
Exactly. And we all have it. I believe that we all have it.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with you.
Yeah.
So you went to the training.
Yeah.
What was it like going through the training, and then how did you transition from that to actually working with clients?
That's such a great question. I actually get chills when you ask me that question. It was so exciting. It was such a fork in my life. I had my own business prior for about 16 years, and I had stayed in that business too long, so to start a new business was really thrilling and exciting. They have training hubs all over the country, so I would drive 2 hours away from me, and I would get in the car, and it was a weekend training, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and there were a number of weekends. And they start you coaching, experiencing coaching right from the get-go. So you don't go in there and study a manual, or it's not slow. They just immerse you into the process. And I love that. To start doing it immediately was thrilling. when I would leave the weekend trainings, I didn't do this obviously the first time, but subsequent trainings, I would bring a tape recorder because I was so full of energy and ideas, and I couldn't write fast enough to capture everything. So I would drive home for 2 hours and talk into my tape recorder and capture everything. It was a thrill.
That's part of how you knew that was the right training for you too, right?
Absolutely.
Do you remember what it felt like about 5 minutes before you were going to see your first client?
My first client. Okay, so maybe my first paying client, because they had us coaching each other as part of the training.
I see.
So maybe my first paying client. I was pretty nervous. I'm trying to remember who was my very first paying client. I was nervous. I think what happened is at that point I was still operating from the point of view that I had to figure it out for them, even though I knew that they knew their own answer. That's been a gradual process. It takes time to really trust and believe that your client does know the answer and that really you have no idea where you're going in the coaching. The Coaches Training Institute, all of the techniques that we use, it's not formulaic. I never know where I'm going to end up at the end of a session. I'm really partnering, I'm creating with my client in that moment what is it that they need. And I partner with them, and we always come up with the next step for them.
One of the things that I was thinking was how common it seems to be for life coaches in the beginning to put a tremendous amount of pressure on themselves to come up with the answer and solve their clients' problems.
Yeah.
You know, I think the things that we forget are not only that the client has the answer within them, if we can facilitate their process, that we can elicit the answers from them, but also that the clients might not be ready for the answer, even if you did have it. And sometimes the work that you do to unstick them is more valuable than the solution itself. And I see so many coaches and psychotherapists go through such agita in the early phases of their practices because they're putting that pressure on themselves. And I like the way that you so eloquently described what you feel the role of the coach is in the process. And also, I kind of empathize with the fact that it takes a while to get there. And even though we're saying this now, I'm sure that when people listening are sitting down with their first clients, they're going to go through that type of pressure and anxiety themselves.
Yeah. One thing that I can offer about that is that one thing that coaches do really well is listen. And since we remove ourselves from the relationship and we're really listening to our clients, that in itself, in and of itself, is a hugely valuable gift to our clients to be really listened to. And just by listening to someone, always make progress in their process. Because
people are generally not listened to.
Exactly.
People walk around with a great deal of frustration and, agitation and ideas and depression and just, normal life struggles that they get to talk about for maybe 5 minutes at a time before whoever they're talking to wants to talk about their reactions and their own life struggles and difficulties and problems. And just by creating an environment where it's possible for this person to talk for a dedicated amount of time, it is very growth-oriented, very growth-producing.
Exactly, and it's hugely beneficial, and it's even hard to get over that. You think they're paying me all this money and all I'm doing is listening? Well, it's not all you're doing. It's hugely valuable to listen to somebody else and, like you said, not chime in with your own experiences or not chime in with a solution because we're so oriented to, well, did you try this, or I would have done this, or let me tell you when that happened to me.
Right.
As a new coach, it's very valuable and not to be overlooked, just listening to another person.
So, Becky, you said that you chose coaching over psychotherapy and mediation and being an attorney, and I think that you said the reason you chose it was because you felt that it embraced all three.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit more and tell me about your perception in particular about coaching versus psychotherapy.
Psychotherapy, this is my perspective, looks at the pathology of the client. There's something wrong that needs to be fixed. What's the problem here? What's the diagnosis? Coaching doesn't look at what's wrong. It looks at what's working. What does this person want? It's very forward thinking. As I'm standing here, my hands, kind of like an airline stewardess, she's pointing to the exit doors.
Yeah.
In front of her, versus therapy looks at, well, what happened? Why did that happen? It looks at the past. So that's a huge difference right there. And we all know that, for example, my daughter is particularly shy. And I do not use that word around her at all because I know I will get more shyness from her if I use that. So what I do is I look for any example, big or small, of when she shines, when she says hello to a stranger, when she starts a conversation when I know she feels uncomfortable, and I highlight that, and I get more of it. And she's actually breaking out of her shyness.
That's a really good way to illustrate what you're saying.
Yeah. And I don't care why she's shy. That's not going to help me help her transition. It doesn't matter why. It matters what does she want, and how can I support her.
So you're looking to identify her strengths and leverage them to help her accomplish what she wants to, as opposed to, in your mind, psychotherapy identifies her weaknesses, tries to look for the root causes of those weaknesses and cure them.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. So I'm reminding her, again, it's that collecting evidence. I'm helping her collect evidence of when she wasn't shy, and that brings out her being confident, being self-assured. That's the evidence I want her to look for, not the evidence of these are all the situations that I'm shy, therefore I'll always be shy, therefore it's hard to change.
Becomes a part of her character.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the experience on the part of the client in the way that you're distinguishing the two is much less painful.
I don't know about less painful. I'm not sure about that. I think in this particular instance, yes. But in coaching, you ask hard questions for the sake of your client, this is going to sound strange, but for the love that I have for my clients, that I want them to succeed, I want them to move forward. I had to ask a client this morning, I said, what is the part that you're playing in not taking yourself seriously?
Gotcha.
That's a hard question to be asked, and she knew that I was coming from a totally loving place. I want her to have what she wants in her life. And I made her look in a place that was hard to look. And she got a lot of information from that. And
she understood that because you were coming from a loving place that you were trying to help her to take responsibility so that you would have more choices in her life to move forward.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to take you back to the chronology that we were going through, if you don't mind. You started out by coaching the fellow students in the CTI Institute. And then how did you go about getting your first clients, and what was that like for you when you decided to open your practice, so to speak?
That's a great question. I just decided I cannot do this former business anymore. I was a graphic designer, and I called up fellow graphic designers and handed them my business and announced to the world, I am a business and personal coach, and put together business cards. I had a brochure at that point, and threw myself into lots of different networking groups, and again announced, this is who I am, this is what I do. I got a phone call from somebody, and he wanted to work with me, and I offered him a sample session. That's how it started.
When you say a sample session, you mean that you don't charge for the first appointment?
Exactly. Coaching is such a personal experience. You want to decide, I think that people are best to pick a coach who's been trained. There's a lot of people right now, I'm a marketing expert, I'm a sales expert, I'm a whatever, and I'm a coach. Coach training is there's a specific set of skills that each school offers, and I advise people to pick somebody who's been trained as a coach. It's different training, just like every training is different. You were explaining to me the reason that you want to have a sample session with someone. It's a very personal experience. You need to have trust in the person. So a sample session is designed to give you a taste of the training that this coach has had, and do you feel like they can help you? Do you feel a connection with them? If you don't have those two things, you need to find a different coach or it's not going to work. What questions would you recommend that a prospective client should be asking their coach? When I look for a coach, I've had a coach now since I started to be trained as a coach. What I do is I ask around, or I would look in different publications, go to the ICF, the International Coach Federation website. You can search on different types of coaches, or you can just do a search on Google for that matter. What I do is I think of an issue in my life, and I, maybe pick 2 or 3 coaches, ask them the same question, and see how they would approach it. That's what I do. And you'll know if you feel a connection with this person or not. I think that's very smart. Yeah. I think it's very smart. It's so rare that people would do that. Usually people will make the call when they hear about somebody or the kind of idea inspires them, but it doesn't occur to them that it's a wide variety of training and there's a wide variety of personal styles. Exactly. And it's very important that it matches to the client. And for the life coaches that are listening to this interview, the reason that I asked Becky that question was not so much that you would be able to choose a coach, although I think you all know that I highly recommend that
if you're going to be doing coaching, that you have a coach so you know what it's like on the other side, but so that you realize that when you educate your clients to the fact that there's an organized and systematic way to go about choosing a coach, you're actually kind of setting the buying criteria for the market. And what I would find in my practice when I did that was that very few people had an organized answer to the kinds of questions I would tell people to ask when they were shopping around, and it made it much more likely that they would be choosing me in the end. And sometimes they wouldn't, because my personality wouldn't match theirs or my training wouldn't match theirs. But, have a method to your madness can make a very big difference on the way you're perceived by the market.
Yeah.
So excuse me for interjecting that for the moment. So you give a sample session, and you went out and announced yourself to the people in your professional network already, and you joined a couple of networking groups, and then lo and behold, somebody called you for a sample session. And how did it go from there?
It went great. He hired me. I mean, it was great because he hired me, and he's still a client. He's a wonderful, wonderful person, and we have a very tight relationship. It was great. I mean, I already knew that I loved coaching, so now to actually have somebody who was paying me money, it was wonderful. It was acknowledgement. I mean, that's another way that you know that you're being a good coach, is that someone...
They come back and they hand you another check, right?
They come back and hand you another check.
Yeah.
They know you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody else telling you except for yourself.
Yeah. And it's also sometimes a surprise that you think that you are doing a good job and they don't come back. And by putting yourself in that feedback loop, you learn very quickly.
Yeah. And it might not mean that you're not a good coach.
Absolutely.
You don't come back.
Absolutely, right.
You're not a good match.
I often tell people about, this is in psychotherapy, not in coaching, but there was a real prevalence. In psychotherapy, you look at the session frequency bell curve, so to speak, and what happens is that there's a real prevalence of people that come in one time and don't come back again. And then if they come in more than once, they'll tend to come for about 7 to 12 sessions.
Uh-huh.
And then there's another drop-off, and if they stay past 12 sessions, they usually come for a half year or a year or so. Psychotherapists are trying to figure out, well, what's going on here? What are people doing wrong, and how can we fix this? And why are we losing half the people after one session? And the most frequent answer they got was that the patient got what they came for. They were happy with the experience. They got exactly what they came for. They didn't understand that there was more for them to do in that process, and so they didn't come back.
Yeah. There's one thing that I really love about coaching. Here's another difference that I see between coaching and psychotherapy, as I understand psychotherapy from the therapists that I've seen. Also, I should say from my training, is that we are always looking for the pattern that's underneath all of the details. So if somebody is talking about, say, for example, they come in, I just can't get enough done at work. There's constant email interruptions, meetings, the phone, my cell phone, can't focus here. Usually, if you look below that pattern, you could come up with lots of strategies. How do I look at my email later or whatever? There could be lots of programs about how to deal with all that interruption. But if you look down underneath, the issue is around boundaries. The issue is around maybe engagement around their work, but somehow those other things have become more important. It may be around time management, but those underlying issues, whatever they happen to be, are also going to show up at home. So in coaching, I'm always looking for what's the pattern underneath all of it. Where else does this show up in somebody's life? Because it always shows up somewhere else.
And because of that, the person's whole life kind of becomes fair game unless they don't want it to be.
Exactly. And you notice a lot of shifts throughout their life, not just at work or not just at home, depending on whatever issue they bring. So it's very, very powerful. I mean, when I started coaching, I thought, well, I'll get a coach through my training period because that's what's required of me. And then somebody pointed out to me, why would you ever not want to have a coach? I mean, it's so hugely beneficial in your life. You get so much more mileage and so much more depth to your life. And I mean, I love my work. My business is called I Love Monday Mornings.
I love that domain, by the way. I love that.
And people have asked me, how'd you come up with that? And I can't remember anymore. I was just thinking about, well, what is this about? What is this about? If you don't love waking up in the morning, something is not right. Something's off. I believe we're here to love what it is that we do. We're creative people. I help people find what it is that they want to be doing in their life and do it.
So they're not just waiting for the next vacation.
Or retirement.
Right.
Or Friday.
Right. Horrible way to live your life. I agree.
That's really sad.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
After the first client came to you, was it difficult to find additional clients?
Well, after you get your first client, you get a really good feeling. You're like, okay, I can do this. I'm getting some confirmation from the outside here. I just kept putting myself out and out. I didn't join, you said, a couple networking groups. I think the first year I joined about 7. I mean, I really went out there. I joined a lot of different groups. My name got out there, and people talk. You develop credibility, you develop trust. You figure out what you want to say when somebody says, what do you do? That's the question that you get asked at a networking group.
And Becky, so is your elevator speech that you're a business and personal coach, and is there more to that core story?
It has been, I'm a business and personal coach. What I often say is I help you get clear about what it is that you want in your life, and I get the stuff that's in the way out of the way. It's shifting now. I realize my coaching, those are skills that I use, but who am I? What's my message in this world? So I'm actually right in the process now of shifting it. I've decided most of my practice, if I look at who are my clients, have been lawyers. And I think that's partially because I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I have a very logical mind. I also have an extremely creative mind, so my left and right brains are pretty highly active. So I'm really shifting it. It's around social change. It's around lawyers and people who want to make structural change in this society for the benefit of people. That it's not based on money. It's based on how are we living as people. Are we happy as people? Do we love Monday morning or not?
What's the contribution that you want to make that will fulfill you?
Yeah. So, and to me, that's a lot more exciting than I'm a business and a personal coach.
And have you found that people respond to you with more excitement and enthusiasm as that story has developed?
They ask different questions. That's what I noticed. They ask different questions. Well, who do you work with, or how do you work? It generates a different set of questions than coaching. What's that? For me, that doesn't really go a lot of places.
It extends the conversation more directly towards an issue that they might be interested in.
Yes.
Makes it more possible to engage with them.
Yeah, and it also helps them think, because they start saying, oh, well, I know a lawyer who has these concerns. Do you work with somebody like that? And again, if you're going for underlying issues, that underlying issue, say it's again around setting boundaries, may be an issue of the person that I'm speaking with, but they're not a lawyer, and they might say, well, I've got that concern. Would you work with me? It helps them learn about what coaching is, even if they're not in my niche.
Love it, yes.
Yeah.
Very important to have a core story.
Yeah.
Now that you look back, and this is about 3.5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that you look back, do you see, maybe not only in yourself, but in some of your colleagues from the training, do you see 2 or 3 very common mistakes that beginner coaches are making that perhaps you could help my listeners to avoid?
I think one of them is something that we've been talking about already. It's that issue around what is it that you offer as a coach. You have to get really clear on the value that you offer before you are certified, if you're going to go that route. And to remind yourself of that over and over and over again. What's the value that I'm offering to my client? I coach a couple of my clients right now are new coaches, and I ask them, keep a journal. In your prep form, a lot of my clients will send me a form before each session to update me on what's transpired from the previous session. What's the value that you're offering your clients right now is one of the questions that I'll ask them on this prep form, to remind them constantly of the value that they are giving to their clients. Having a coach is hugely important. Again, you want to be collecting that evidence of the value that you offer your clients in any of the many places where we're blocked as coaches, as people. Everyone is blocked as a person. It's not like some of us have it together and some don't. Life is a process.
And it's a difficult world that we live in.
And it's a difficult world, and it's gotten more complicated.
Just for the record, I've had coaches and mentors, and, I come from a long family of psychologists. There's 17 psychologists in my family. And
oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And I always joke with people that when I turned 16, all my friends were talking about wanting to drive a car, and I couldn't wait to turn 16 because my dad said I can go into psychotherapy when I was 16. And we didn't have life coaching back then.
Yeah.
We didn't have the word life coaching, and so there were factions of psychotherapists in the circles that I worked with and grew up with that were talking about the more growth-oriented strength focus that you're describing life coaching with. And so that's what was so exciting to me. And I've really followed those principles my whole life. I've always had coaches and mentors, and the levers that you get, I don't know why you would go with that one once you realize what you can. But
it's invaluable.
do you think that there are a lot of new coaches who try to go it alone?
How do you mean go it alone?
Without a coach.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think common theme is, how can I afford that? And not really understanding the benefit of it.
What do you tell them when they ask how can they afford it?
How could you not afford it? When you've been coached, what benefit have you gotten from it? Why would you not want that as you're building your practice? Forget building a practice. Why would you not want that in your life? I mean, honestly, coaching is the best thing that ever happened to me. The way my brain operates is differently. I don't think in terms of I have this choice or that choice. I think, here's all my choices. I have a zillion choices. And before, there were all these products out there. What was that one, a whack on the side of your head, the Creative Whack Pack?
Sure, but De Bono, yeah.
Right? And I would pull one of those cards out, and it would offer a new way of looking at something, and I didn't get it. I didn't understand how thinking out of the box would help me open up my toolbox of possibilities. As a coach, I've learned techniques about how to do that, and it's invaluable to have possibility in your life. We also use more than just our left brain logical thinking. So we use all of our senses to help us evaluate possibilities. It's invaluable to be reminded, these are my values in my life. This is my vision in my life, so I know I'm on track. Oh, here's that self-limiting belief again. What's a strategy on how to deal with that limiting belief? Because it's going to head me off at the path. And talk about going back in my life, that's what kept happening. Something kept limiting me, and then it was like I would wake up again and I would go, oh, here's another way I could look at that. But, maybe a year or two had gone by. I mean, I had those same questions when I was 16. I was like, why do people think the way they think? Or why do they behave the way they behave? How do things work? What's the purpose? I have all these why questions, and I would read and try to understand all of it. And then I had coaching. I was like, I have the tools.
It sounds like your approach when someone says that they can't afford you as a coach is to, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
Oh, if they can't afford me as a coach. Oh, I misunderstood you.
Well, what did you think I asked you? Because it was very interesting what you were saying. What did you think I asked?
I thought you meant like if a fellow colleague was saying that they couldn't afford a coach. I didn't understand if you're saying somebody said...
Oh, well, no, yes, that's what I meant. Well, you had mentioned that you have several coaches as clients.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine that you've been in the situation, as have I, that a coach had come to me about the possibility for a sample session and felt that they couldn't afford to engage in a coaching relationship. And it sounds like your answer should be akin to the way that I would handle it, would be to understand what they're trying to accomplish in their life and their practice, and point out to them the different ways that going through the coaching process could lift those limiting beliefs, and that essentially they couldn't afford not to, which has been my experience. I mean, I've gone into debt to pay my mentors at earlier points in my career because there's just nothing like the education. People are going to think that we're just pitching coaching services. I don't mean to do that, but I think this is a core value that you'll find in virtually any successful coach is they walk the talk. They've really embraced the lifestyle for themselves in their personal lives, and that's so empowering for them. That really fuels their passion to be the best coach that they can be.
Yeah, I think once you experience coaching in the right situation, you can't say no to it. It's impossible. You absolutely know that you need to do it because it's invaluable.
Agreed. So if you have a new life coach coming to you who's just getting started in the business, what are the three most important things you'd like them to do right away?
First and foremost is to come up with some kind of a structure to remind themselves of the value that they're offering to their clients. If you don't have that self-confidence and know that you're offering value to your clients, first of all, nobody is going to hire you because you can you can smell it a mile away if somebody doesn't feel confident.
Yeah.
You have to be very aware of how you're offering value to your clients. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is that You have to get pretty strategic about your boundaries. I mean, I left my old business and dove into coaching, so it was very clear for me when I was coaching and when I wasn't. But you have to get really clear. These are my coaching times, especially if you have a family. This is when I'm coaching, this is when I'm not. Business things that you would do, you need to get an accountant. You need to have your own separate checking account. You have to set yourself up structurally so that you are taking yourself seriously. It's like, are you serious about it or aren't you? How you approach your business, you need to be serious. You need to have presence on the web. You need to have a business card. Maybe you're doing an e-letter, whatever it is, your marketing strategy, your presence. I think presence is really important. Putting yourself out there in the community is really important. People refer me to other people because they know me, because I'm trusted and known in the community.
And you have a very easy domain name to remember.
Easy domain name, ilovemondaymornings.com.
Yes, that's the kind of thing that can be referred by word of mouth.
Yep, so pick something easy. Pick something you need. I think self-confidence, probably hiring a coach would be important. I remember when I first started coaching, there was a little backlog. There was a backlog of stuff I had to deal with, and I got through that, and there's still issues that I have, but they're not so big right now because I get coached regularly.
So do you mean a backlog of personal issues that you were thrown up against because you were coaching all these people, or do you mean a backlog of business logistics that you had to attend to?
Honestly, both. Really both. Because your personal life and your business life really overlap. I mean, it's your life. So there was a backlog of both. Yeah.
Gotcha. So I'm very struck by the themes in what you're saying. And it sounds like going through these 3 points that you made is the theme of taking yourself seriously as a coach. Are you really going to do this?
Yeah.
And if you are, then how are you going to know when you're delivering value to your client?
Yeah.
What is your business going to look like? Is this going to look like a hobby, or are you going to look like someone who's really serious about offering their professional services? And are you going to get involved with the process for your own development so that you have a place to, for one, process what's going on with your clients, but also to continue to, develop your own journey?
Yeah.
And the one thing I wanted to ask you about those 3 things was, what does it look like to set up a structure that shows you that you have value to your clients?
Again, all of the work that I do is custom with each particular client. So I have one client who has started a journal, and in it she writes down every time she hears acknowledgement from the outside. She's still at the point where it's hard for her to acknowledge to herself the value. So we're one step prior in the process where she's at least tracking and trying to hear the acknowledgement from the outside in, so from her clients and her family and me as her coach, reminding her, collecting that evidence of what she's doing well, what the value is that she offers to her clients.
Gotcha.
So that might be one. Some people like Post-its all over the place. A structure could be anything. It could be, I'm looking on my desk right now, there's a little elephant on my desk. I could remind myself to toot my own horn, because an elephant's got a big horn. And so every time I look at it,
I love that.
Right? Say one good thing about myself to remind myself. It's all about the evidence.
You help your coaching clients collect evidence to see the value in themselves, but as a new coach who's entering the field, you're suggesting that they should also be collecting evidence that they are developing value to their client in those ways.
Oh, yeah. And that they need to come up with a structure that's going to work for them. The elephant might work for somebody. The Post-its might work for someone else. I don't know what that structure is for my clients. They do.
Sure. So it might be a journal. It might be a...
Exactly.
Okay. Becky, when you decided on your training, you must have been presented with a maze of confusing options. Mm-hmm. How did you come to CTI? How did you decide on CTI?
I wanted a coach training school that was accredited. I looked at the programs that different training schools were offering, and I had a sense about CTI, Coaches Training Institute, that felt favorable. And then most of the schools will offer an hour introductory telephone call, a bridge line call that you call in for free. You pay long distance, and one of their faculty will come on the call, and you can ask questions, or they'll give you an experience of what coaching is. CTI is all about the experience of coaching. And once you experience something, it's very easy to tell if you want it or not. You go rollerblading or you get on a bicycle. And once you do that, you decide, well, I like riding on bikes and I don't like roller skating. If you just look at the bike and you look at the skates, it's really hard to tell which one you're going to like and which one you don't. And you can read all you want about it, but once you actually have the experience of it, you know. That's what's different about CTI. So I experienced it, and I was like, this is great. I love it. I want it.
Great. I've heard only positive things about CTI, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great school. I mean, there's other really good schools out there, too, so people have to pick what works for them. Do they want to be in person? Do they want to be on phone? Do they want a programmed approach? Do they want it more custom?
In addition to going to your coaches, is there any other coaching training that you continue to go through?
I would love to do the Newfield method. That would be my next approach.
What is it about the Newfield method?
They are, I'm trying to remember the exact terminology, but they're very into using your body as an instrument. And our bodies, it's a whole source of knowledge that's highly underutilized. CTI touches on it, and I've learned to use my body a lot, but the Newfield method delves into it, and I think it would just be a huge addition to my coaching.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's actually a technique, when I was talking before about, in our society we think there's either this option or that option, and we do the pros and cons. That's our normal way of answering any question, solving any problem. And that's often what we're all faced with every day. We're making decisions. And in coaching you learn that there's 5 possibilities, or there's 10, as many as you want. And you can experience each one of those options by using your body and using your mind. That's what the most valuable thing that I learned from CTI. And I know how to move somebody through that process so that they get more information and they can choose, based on their values and on their vision, what they want in their life. What's the next thing that's going to move them forward in their process?
Love it.
Yeah.
How long did it take you before you felt confident that you'd be able to support yourself as a coach?
I'd say like a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere in there, until I actually had the fun. I was pretty confident from the get-go. I'm pretty much, once I decide I want something, I'm a go-getter. There's a line in coaching, don't quit your day job.
Right.
I had to dive into it. I couldn't juggle 2 things at once.
So you really immersed yourself in it.
I immersed myself. I think that's another thing. That's a pretty risky thing to say, but I think for coaches who are willing to give up their day job and have figured out the financial end of it, personally I think it's a better approach to really immerse yourself in it and don't keep the day job and try to juggle it, because it's too much to juggle. From my point of view, it's too much to juggle.
Had you saved enough money or had another source of support that for that year and a half or 2 years that you weren't on the verge of bankruptcy?
That's probably my biggest mistake. No, I didn't do that. We ended up refinancing our house.
I see.
To support it, and I wanted to do additional training on top of it. And my husband, he gets frustrated at me here and there, but he totally supports what I'm doing. And he was willing to take that risk with me, knowing that the benefit was going to override the kind of a concern of refinancing your house.
I see.
He was right there with me.
I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That would have been more strategic if I had figured out the finances ahead of time.
But it wouldn't have been in alignment with your passion and need to get in very quickly.
Yeah, or just, I think there's a misconception that since coaching has such a low overhead that you really don't need financing. And I think looking back now, it's really important to realize that you do need financing.
Well, because there's the opportunity cost, because even though you're not paying for the time in an office that you're renting or something like that. Oh, I didn't even ask if you're coaching more on the telephone or more in person.
More on the telephone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but even though all you have is a telephone set, that you're still got the opportunity cost of what else you could be doing with that time.
Yeah.
And if that time used to be used to pay other bills, and you can make a whole stack of trouble for yourself if you haven't thought that through.
Yeah. And training, too. I mean, training is not inexpensive. It's worth it, but it costs money.
Yep. And having a supportive spouse is
critical.
It's really, it's very helpful. It's harder to do it without one. You can definitely do it, but it's harder to do it.
It takes more, you have to keep collecting more evidence because you're going to be fighting the evidence that they're collecting.
Well, okay, so in the event that you would have an antagonistic spouse, I hadn't even thought of that, but there are a lot of people out there that are single that are trying to make the transition, or they're their only source of financial support.
Right.
And it's a little more risky to make the jump that you're describing if you don't have a financial partner.
Exactly. Or some equity to fall back on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Was it hard to get used to talking on the telephone, coaching on the telephone?
No, that's another thing that we learned. We learned how to do it, and we actually did it from the get-go. So we went to these weekend trainings, and then in between one training and the next, we were instructed to coach, our fellow colleagues who start our businesses right away. And I literally, this is a big way that I got started. I called up everyone that I knew, friends and family, and any acquaintance, anybody from my old profession, and I said, I'm starting coaching, and I'd love to give you a sample session. Are you interested? And I would coach over the phone right from the get-go. I think it's better to do it from the get-go because you're less nervous and make as many mistakes as possible. Get them over with.
Yeah.
Don't hold out.
Yeah.
Just lay it on the line and you move through it.
Well, I have one last question for you,
Okay.
and then we'll wind down. But I'm wondering, in the years that you've been coaching, has there been any event that at some point shook your self-confidence or your self-esteem?
There was one. There was a person who was interested in my coaching. She wanted to do a sample session with me. She came to my studio and we did one. She hired me. First I do an introductory strategy session. It's a 2-hour-long strategy. Get really good foundation about the situation and person's values and those limiting beliefs. And we worked with each other. I think we had about 3 sessions after that, and then she wanted to stop. And she really didn't want to tell me why. And I did not understand what happened at all. I was really shaking because I thought we were on to something. I thought we were working really well together. So what we're taught to do is to ask the person what happened. I mean, it's all about honesty. It's all about truth, and that's what I require of my clients. It's in my contract. I want you to be honest. You don't like something, tell me. So I was persistent and finally got her on the phone and asked her, and I didn't really get a clear answer, but the act of me asking her was what was important to me. It did throw me. I thought, what's wrong? Did I do something wrong?
Why was it the act of asking resolved that for you?
Yeah, it's a really great question.
I have some ideas if you don't.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Sometimes giving ourselves permission to do something that feels a little scary or a little uncomfortable is more satisfying than actually hearing or finding out whatever it is that you wanted to find out. It's empowering to be open to receiving what somebody might say or not. It's not so important what it is they say. It's the act of doing it.
Because you've already gone through in your mind what the worst possibilities might be.
Yeah, it's hugely empowering.
I agree.
A lot of times what happens in a particular coaching session is that people want to say something to somebody, but they think that they're going to burst into anger or burst into tears. And by exploring those options here with me as their coach, they realize the approach that they really want to take with that person, but they had to get through the tears of the anger first. So it's like letting our minds have all of the possibilities instead of feeling boxed in allows us to make really good choices.
I've had people that I really wanted to work with leave me after 1 or 2 or sometimes even after 5 or 6 sessions.
Yeah.
And it's taken at times a year or 2 before I figured out why.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 1 or 2 that I really wanted to work with me that I could never figure out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't appropriate that I chase them too much.
Mm-hmm.
I would usually call people one time, but it's not in their best interest or my best interest for me to chase them. And I think that what happens when somebody that we really want to work with leaves us in the absence of feedback is that it brings up all of our monsters in our head. Mm-hmm. You know, and we think of all of the things that we do wrong, that we know that we make mistakes as a coach, as a psychotherapist, and it just launches you into this self-critical mode. And I think that the reason that it worked so well for you to call her and face the question, to find out what happened, and that resolved it, was that she said, okay, what's the worst thing she could possibly tell me? Let me hear it. Mm-hmm. You know, and once you were willing to face that, it's like, you know, the monster comes out into the light and
it gets small.
I used to tell people when they were going for job interviews that before they went for the job interview, they should write down the 3 worst possible questions they could imagine being, you know, asked. Like, you know, aren't you just really stupid, or didn't you screw off at your last job, or whatever it was. And if they can come up with an answer for those 3 questions, that there was nothing that the person could ask them that could throw them off base. And it almost always works.
Great exercise. Yeah, it's true. It's like that monster gets really small.
Right. And I think that being a coach overall and being willing to walk into situations day in and day out where you're having these very meaningful and intense personal relationships, that you're putting yourself in a situation where you're up against those monsters all the time. And to me, that's worth a lot more than the money, because you wind up walking around with this confidence that you can deal with almost any life situation.
Yeah. I think you're really hitting it on the spot. I mean, that's the key of it, and that's what I want my clients to walk away with, is those techniques on how to deal with those monsters, because we all have them, and those monsters pull us off track. And once you learn how to deal with them, then, of course, we still get the monsters attacking us, but now we know how to befriend them, or...
They have names.
They have names.
Yeah.
We can approach that. Every client comes to me and they're like, I must be really bad. And I'm like, no, actually, you're normal. You're just like me and everyone else. And don't let anyone tell you different, because this is the truth.
Right.
My dad said to me recently, he said, you must get so exhausted working with all these people. And I said, no. I said, actually, I am inspired by my clients, and I get energy working with them. I really, really love coaching. I can't imagine doing anything else.
The other thing that I think people don't often talk about in terms of the value of being a coach is that you wind up with all these stories inside of you, and, you know, because in your day-to-day experience, people don't reveal to you to the level that they reveal to you when you're coaching them. You don't really get to see how everybody's thinking out there.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see how they solve problems, and everybody solves problems in a different way. Everybody really does have a creative brilliance, and if your job is to facilitate their creative brilliance, what eventually winds up happening is that a little piece of their creative brilliance winds up inside of you.
Yeah.
And you're walking around with all these stories inside of you and all these different approaches to situations, and problems just seem to melt away.
Yeah, it's really true. It's a huge benefit. You know, that's part of my benefit package, is that I get like little pieces of my clients in me, you know, their strategies in me, their creative brilliance in me. It's a huge benefit. Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, Becky, I think we're going to start to wind down. Are there any last words of wisdom or anything that I forgot to ask you about your experience life coaching? Or
tell me about, like, the crux of it. Like, if you could get something that you're wanting from me, like, what is it that you really want these new coaches to, what's the question that you really want to have answered for them?
Okay, let me think about that for a second.
Yeah.
I think you've already answered it. I think that the reason that I wanted to do the interview was so that my listeners could get a little piece of you inside of them. I think that it can be very time-consuming for people to make the calls and attend all the different trainings and get a sense from the inside out of what it's like to be a life coach and the struggles and joys that go along with that. And I was hoping that you would bare your heart and soul about it, and I think you really did, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I feel like I got what I came for.
Great.
If you had any questions for me, I would be happy to answer them.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I was mostly responding to the questions, you know, that you were asking, and I was trying to really get at, you know, like the real heart of the matter, like what is it that would be really helpful. I mean, I think the part about you got to take yourself seriously and do whatever it takes to take yourself seriously, because your mind is going to tell you that you're not offering value. It's going to tell you you're not ready, you're not prepared, you can't do it till you're certified. All of that's not true. And what's your strategy going to be to collect that evidence and to stand in a different, we call it standing in a different perspective, having a different frame of mind to approach your clients, approach your day, approach your business, approach yourself. What's going to be your technique of how to do that? You need one, because your mind is very, very powerful, and it's going to step in there and try to put up roadblocks. You got to be strategic about how to knock them down or how to make them little so they're just like a little pebble in the road.
Love
That's the trick.
Hey, Becky, do you still have room in your practice if a couple of my listeners wanted to call you for a sample session or something like that?
I'd be happy to. I have a few spots right now, and it's always changing, so I'd hope that I'd have one available.
How do they get a hold of you?
They can give me a phone call. My number is 413-584-4525, and they can call 24/7, leave me a message of good times to reach them, or they can email me. It's Becky at ilovemondaymornings.com.
Perfect. Hey, thanks very much for your time and attention. If you'd like to hear 4 million-dollar marketers and coaches revealing their most treasured secrets for building a financially rewarding and emotionally fulfilling coaching practice, regardless of whether you're a business or personal coach, even if you've never done a single session, and even if you have no credentials, training, or any earthly idea how to get your first paying client, please visit coachesthatmakemoney.com. That's coachesthatmakemoney.com. coachesthatmakemoney.com. Thanks.